Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, February 4th, 2025, and our friend Laith Marouf is back with us. Welcome back, Laith.
Good to be with you, Nima.
Let's get started with the situation in Lebanon, in southern part of Lebanon. What can we learn from that part of Lebanon?
Yeah, so for the last 3 days, there was another wave of Lebanese civilians breaking through and trying to get to their villages and liberating them. On Sunday, there was a big mass of people, thousands of residents of these villages converged on the checkpoints that the Lebanese military had set up before their villages, and then they pushed through. And the Lebanese military actually this time walked with them on the sides of them and in front of them to protect them from any unexploded ordnance that the Israelis left. There was a few locations where the Lebanese military got the population to wait as they cleared mounds of earth that the Israelis put on the road, fearing that there could be some unexploded ordinances inside these mounds that the Israelis may have put there just for, vengeance. And so it was a great scene. And there was only now a few villages that are left, specifically in the central zone of the border with the occupied Palestine, that were not liberated Sunday and Monday. And today, finally, we see the Israelis withdrawing as we're speaking right now, as we're live here, from these few villages in the center of the border. And so at this point, there's only like 3, 4 villages that are right on the triangle between Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine in the shadow of the Golan Heights that are still occupied by the Israelis. And it's clear that the pressure from the Lebanese army and the Lebanese people, and the fact that the Lebanese army and the Lebanese government have worked with the people to liberate these towns, is now mounting this pressure on the Israelis, and they're having to respond to it. I think the Israelis thought that with the handpicking by the Americans of the new president, General Joseph Aoun, that this new president will actually, collaborate with the Americans fully. But it seems like the American calculation didn't pan out as they wished. Maybe now that President Joseph Aoun has reached the position, he's in his going to be president for the next 5 years. There's no way to take him out. Maybe now he is ridding himself of any American influence that was on him as the head of the military, a position that could be removed easily. So, and now with the coming forming of the new government by the appointed prime minister, it's clear also the new prime minister is not excluding Hezbollah or Amal as the West wished from positions in the different ministries. So again, these are all good indicators that the new president and the new prime minister, while they may listen to the needs of the West or what the Americans want or what the French or what the Saudis want, they still have a priority for Lebanese patriotism, Lebanese sovereignty, and that's coming out in what we see now in the border happening.
And how do you find the relationship between Hezbollah and the government in Lebanon? Is that improving? Is that getting better?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things were surprising to me, even, for instance, we saw over the last week the Saudis and the Americans threatening not to lift any sanctions and not to help in the rebuilding of the country if the new prime minister, Salam, who was the head of the International Court of Justice, was also on the case of the genocide accusations against the Zionist colony. We saw him, there was all that pressure on him not to allow appointment of ministers that may be associated with Hezbollah or Amal. But we saw him yesterday release the names of the majority of the ministers that he is suggesting, and we can clearly see that there's some names that are counted as if they are supportive of Hezbollah or Amal, although they're not members of those parties. So clearly, the new prime minister is making sure that there is no exclusion of Amal and Hezbollah. And the other thing is that, we all thought maybe he will exclude those Amal and Hezbollah, and then he will give some maybe seats to the Phalange or the Kataib party. These are the two Christian supremacist parties that are aligned with Israel and the US. Well, surprise, surprise, the memes that came out had no members of those two parties. So what was looked at before as a prime minister that was handpicked by the Americans and these parties to exclude Hezbollah is now doing the opposite. He's excluding these collaborationist fascist parties, and he is including the patriotic parties like Hezbollah and Amal in his new cabinet suggestion. So, of course, we will wait for the full cabinet formation to come out and then for the parliament to vote on it. But it seems like he will have an easy time to get the approval of the parliament, since the majority of the parties that have representation have now seats in this new cabinet. So even if there was an objection by the Kataib or the Phalange, they will not be able to block the formation of the government. This is all good for Lebanon. And I think this reconciliation, it seems like, that's happening between Hezbollah and the new president and the new prime minister is going to work well for the country.
Do you see any difference between the Biden administration and the Trump administration in terms of the leverage or the soft power they have on Lebanon?
Both of them wanted to get Lebanon to, on its knees to give Israel whatever it wants to. And so what I think with the coming of Trump and him being so blunt in his support for Israel, expansionism and genocide and ethnic cleansing, this is making the job of Hezbollah and any patriotic party in Lebanon much easier, because the Democrats put honey on the poison that they throw on the country here. With Trump, it's only poison with no honey on it. So it's harder to fool people. It's also easier to convince Lebanese population that is not fully aligned with the resistance that it's not in the interest of Lebanon to continue collaborating with the US or listening to our dictates. Before, with the Democrats, with that honey in on the poison, there's many Lebanese that could have been fooled. Now it's not possible to be fooled, and especially that Trump has been kind of denigrating even Saudi Arabia and others, with his demands for $1 trillion from the Saudis as an investment. So this is like making anyone in Lebanon that thought that the Saudis may have influence over America, that could help Lebanon, understand that the Saudis are nothing but a cash cow for America.
I think Lebanese people have each and every reason to understand the situation with the United States and Israel not leaving the southern Lebanon, even though the government in Lebanon has decided to go after some sort of ceasefire with them, but they've not been leaving Lebanon as we've been talking about it so far. But here comes the main question in the mind of the people in Lebanon. What would be the alternative? Is there any sort of alternative but unity within the country? There has to be some sort of mutual understanding between various factions, parties within Lebanon. Because without having that sort of unity, you can see that the foreign forces from the United States, from Arab states, from Israel, they don't want that happening. That here come is that going to happen? Is that going to be better than before?
Well, look, Lebanon has been an experiment for the West over the last 80 years to, you know, brainwash and create new fabricated identities, um, it was chopped off from Syria. There was no such thing as Lebanon before. There was Mount Lebanon, and it's just a region in Syria. And then it was chopped off. It's had a small population that is very diverse. And we saw how the French and the British and then the Americans all tried to influence different sects in the country, give them different status to create division. And before for a long time, we've been hearing how some of these groups, like the Phalange and the Kataib, want to have a federalism within this very small country that will diverge into little statelets that are like one neighborhood is a state, So it got to a ridiculous point, and a lot of times anything that, as we say in Arabic, anything that exceeds its limit flips to its opposite. So the attempt to have extreme sectarianism in Lebanon, to weaken it, is now swinging to the opposite. And we, especially with this outright genocidal war that the Israelis conducted on Lebanon, and the mass destruction and the attacks on religious sites that are Christian above and beyond the Muslim sites and heritage sites and so forth, this has weakened the ability of the US to create divisions and sectarianism. We saw all this unity from the people. So the parties that could have led these sectarian division movements are now weakened within their own population. So let's say the Phalange and the Kataib, Christian supremacists, where were they to protect the Christian holy sites? The tomb of Simon Peter, one of the disciples of Jesus, the prophet of Palestine, destroyed, desecrated. The tomb of Shimon, another sage within Christianity, also again desecrated and destroyed. And the Israelis filmed themselves, the Israeli soldiers, going into churches and desecrating all the icons in the church, these soldiers, high and drunk, and then having gay weddings inside the church as a joke. Those are all, this is, Hezbollah was protecting these sites. Where were these Christian militias that are Christian supremacists in defending these sites? So their own population that are Maronite or Orthodox or Catholic, they all were angry at the inability of the state and or their parties that claim that they represent them to defend these sites. And they were very happy to see Hezbollah defending these sites and being martyred to defend these sites. So now we have this, you see, again, we go back to the situation of anything that goes to an extreme flips to the opposite of it. And the attempt to have extreme sectarianism now is creating unity.
Laith, how's it going right now between Hezbollah and Iran after the situation in Syria? Many people are arguing that As time goes by, the situation is getting worse in terms of the connection between Hezbollah and Iran. But there are some people arguing that the in the aftermath of the fall of Assad, maybe they can find their alternative ways of communication.
Yeah, I mean, Hezbollah views the Ayatollah as the highest authority for it's not only the Shia in Lebanon, but themselves as a party. And Hezbollah, even during the war, 16 months war, tried to make sure that Iran does not become a main target. Not because they wouldn't have loved to see Iran take full force military action during the war, but because they see the safety of Iran and its continuous development as the only guarantor that there will be a full, swing in the arc of history. Iran has been able to survive as a sovereign nation since 1979, and in those 40, 50 years, was able to lift itself from poverty to become one of the most important nations in terms of production of science and education and military equipment and military knowledge, and has become the first Muslim country that can send satellites into space. And so all of those, successes of Iran is why we see the ability of Ansarullah in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Palestinian resistance inside Palestine to continue to resist. It's almost it's like the same situation where Egypt was in the 1950s, when Egypt was still a sovereign country and not a tool of the US, and was able to build its own industries and nationalize the Suez Canal and defend the rest of the Arabic people, send them weapons, send them training, send them knowledge. This is why we had Libya and Algeria being liberated from French and Italian occupation. Without Egypt at that time, this wouldn't have happened. So today, to make sure that we don't have the same problem that we had with the failure or the fall of Egypt to American influence with the Sadat presidency, and then its exit from the whole Arabic world or the Muslim world as a important factor that decides the future, it's important to make sure that Iran doesn't fall. Its fall will, bring back the whole struggle of liberation in the region to decades. Yes, the fall of Syria was a heavy, heavy thing. I'm as a Syrian, I'm still wounded from that. And Syria is historically, for thousands of years, is the key to control of the Levant, okay, and the Arabic world, at least the Asian parts of the Arabic world. And it is sad that Syria, for the first time since the end of World War II, falls back to imperial control. But from history, we see also that Syria is not an easy place to control by any foreign power. And now in the last few days, we saw the announcement of the new Islamic resistance in Syria, which launched attacks on Zionist locations in the occupied zones that the Zionists occupied over the last month, and attacks on HTS leadership in different parts of the country. So those are indications that actually, the historical record of Syria's importance and the fact that it's hard to be held by a foreign colonizer are now playing out as history tells us they should play out. And the safety of Iran and the Hezbollah's fighters and supporters and so forth in the region was key to make sure that we come back to this moment. So the withdrawal of Iran from Syria, safeguarding its fighters and its generals that were on the ground, and safeguarding the Hezbollah fighters that withdrew was important and key in the formation of the new resistance groups in Syria.
Do you think that in the West Bank the situation is getting? Are we gonna have a new Gaza in the West Bank even with Donald Trump in office in Washington?
Yeah, we already are having a new Gaza in the West Bank. Over the last 3 weeks now, it's been a non-stop attack on Jenin and Jenin refugee camp, Tulkarem camp, Nablus, and the outskirts of Beit Lahem. And 2 days ago, the Israelis destroyed a whole neighborhood in Jenin, blowing up something like 30 buildings at once. There is, whole neighborhoods of Jenin and Jenin camp are erased, destroyed, all the buildings. There's around already 100,000 refugees internally displaced from Jenin, Tulkarem, and Nablus. And there's multiple villages in the outskirts of Beit Lahem and Ramallah that are being attacked on a daily basis by hordes of colonists. Two of those villages have already been emptied of their inhabitants and their homes destroyed. So this campaign that we saw in Gaza is now being repeated in the West Bank. The only difference is that there isn't fully armed resistance like in Gaza that could defend completely. But it is still fighting. The Palestinian resistance is still fighting the Israelis, but it doesn't have the weapons that they have in Gaza, and it doesn't have the tunnels and the underground cities to protect those fighters. The other difference between what was happening in Gaza and what's happening now in the West Bank is in the West Bank you have a collaborationist force of the Palestinian Authority of Mahmoud Abbas that is actually conducting raids of their own in Palestinian villages and cities and towns in the West Bank and arresting resistance members and handing them over to the Israelis, and or they're going into these towns and refugee camps and looking for any of the booby traps and these roadside bombs that the resistance would put in as ambushes for any advancing Israelis and dismantling them. So this is where the resistance in the West Bank and the population in the West Bank are in a worse condition to defend themselves than the Palestinians that were in Gaza. And given that we heard, Trump hinting that he will allow the annexation of the West Bank and hinting that he wants the expulsion of the Palestinians from Gaza, maybe also from the West Bank, then it's clear that the Israelis have the go-ahead to do whatever they want to.
They're talking about giving the responsibility of the Gaza to the PA, to the Palestinian Authority. How is that? How many forces do they have to do that? And is that comparable to Hezbollah? I'm talking about the quantity of forces they have.
Well, according to what the Americans announce, the PA security forces is like around 30,000. They're trained by and founded by General Dalton, American general in the early 2000s. But this is a force that cannot really control Gaza. It's not big enough, number one. Number two is that we can see in the West Bank over the last week or so that the Palestinians in the West Bank themselves are revolting against the security forces controlled by Mahmoud Abbas. There's been clashes. There's been even ambushes for some of these officers of the PA. I don't know if I mentioned it last week on your show, but there was a officer that controls the PA security forces in Tulkarem. Two youth rammed their car into his car, pulled him out, and gave him a whipping in the street and destroyed his car. So any of these officers within the PA that their faces are known and their names are known are now scared, right? That the Palestinians could retaliate against them. Any Palestinian, somebody from their family could shoot them for what they're doing. And we saw already also defections. Multiple officers, both in Jenin and Tulkarem, from the Palestinian security forces, security forces, have openly, in front of cameras, took off their fatigues and said they don't work anymore with the PA because of this collaboration. So the whole security force that Mahmoud Abbas controls is disintegrating. Whether it's by these officers that are refusing the orders, and or because with the direct confrontations that are happening. There was demonstrations in Ramallah, not yesterday, the day before yesterday. Thousands upon thousands of people in Ramallah. This is supposed to be the green zone that Mahmoud Abbas controls, and they descended on the headquarters of the security forces. And barely, it was stopped from them breaking into and setting it on fire. So the situation is not safe for the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. So how can it do anything in Gaza? And I tell you, if they set foot in Gaza, they will be killed immediately. There's no joke about that. The last time the Palestinian Authority of Mahmoud Abbas attempted to take control of Gaza was in 2006, after the elections, the last elections that Hamas won, and the PA security forces were sent by Israel to enter Gaza, and there was military clashes, and they were defeated within hours, and they had to withdraw like dogs with their tails between their legs, and they never showed up again. So it's been almost 20 years since the Palestinian Authority security forces attempted to touch the ground of Gaza.
For those people who are talking about Gaza without Hamas, what is the main goal of saying that? But on the other hand, is that possible in your opinion?
It's wishful thinking. The Saudis, the Emiratis, the Israelis wish that Gaza can exist without Hamas. And this is why they supported this genocide. Most of these collaborationist regimes in the Arabic world were hoping that Israel can defeat Hamas and that Hamas will never exist again. But as we see, the Israelis were unable to defeat Hamas. So Hamas is now even more legitimate than it was before. If there was any opposition to Hamas before, it barely exists now inside Gaza. If there is actually an election in the Palestinian Authority, even in the West Bank, probably Hamas will win the vast majority of seats, because people see that Hamas not only survived and fought and into a standstill against the whole might of the empire, but that Hamas leaders were martyred and their families were martyred. So Hamas and its leaders and its members are willing to sacrifice themselves, sacrifice their family, all for the freedom of the Palestinian people. While on the other side, you have the Palestinian Authority, autocrats that are sitting in cushy rooms with air conditioning and going around the world and making millions of dollars. The sons of Mahmoud Abbas, one of them is in Canada as a millionaire. He never set foot in Palestine in at least a decade. And so it's clear that the difference is is between like night and day. And the loyalties that existed before that were connected to party, you know, most families, their members stay with one party. So let's say the grandfather was a valiant resistance member in Fatah when Fatah was actually resisting. And now his grandchildren are still Fatah. But that connection now is dissolving because we saw the uh, military wing of Fatah, the Aqsa brigades, actually fighting on the side of Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza. We saw them also in Jenin and Tulkarem fighting on the side of Hamas and Islamic Jihad. So the military wing is almost totally detached now from Fatah as a political party that is corrupt. And therefore, the loyalties of those families and their members that were Fatah are now shifting towards the military wing, and they're abandoning the political party of Fatah itself. So it's clear that the only control that Mahmoud Abbas has is over the few collaborationists and the ones that take bribes and so forth. That's the only people that he has influence over, and that's not going to save him much longer.
Does he care, Mahmoud Abbas? Does Mahmoud Abbas care about Israel capturing all of the West Bank, or they don't care about that? They can live with Israelis.
Yeah, I think Mahmoud Abbas is now like Biden in terms of him being a vegetable. Mahmoud Abbas is in his mid 80s. And so this is a man that doesn't have much mental capabilities left. And so clearly it's the corrupt circle around him that is controlling things. And these are all people that are bought by the West and Israel. And they have bank accounts in foreign countries. They own palaces and so on in Paris and London, just like the other corrupt leaders that are under the influence of the West, like Zelensky, for instance. His country is burning down, but he's sending his wife with Gucci bags and Boss and whatever it is, clothing, and going to resorts. This is the life of the small circle around Mahmoud Abbas. And these people are totally disattached. They're totally disattached from reality. Inside the West Bank, they have more in common with Zelensky, with Netanyahu's kids that are in Florida, than with the kids of the rest of the Palestinian people. So I don't think they will do anything that could jeopardize their wealth. These corrupt small circle around Mahmoud Abbas, and as we see, they are now emboldened. At least for now, they think that they can openly fight on the side of the Israelis inside the West Bank. But again, as I mentioned, this is not going to last for long. There's already cracks, wide cracks happening within their security forces of the PA, and they will regret the day that they thought, well, Hamas is dead, or the whole axis of resistance is defeated, or whatever it is. Those moments after the ceasefire in Lebanon and the beginning of the ceasefire in Gaza that may have deluded and some of these people thinking that it's over, they're on the winning side. Now they're discovering that Israel didn't win anything, and Hamas is still big and bigger, and Hezbollah is reviving, and the whole axis of resistance is reorganizing, and they're going to find themselves crushed under the weight of change that's going to happen.
Donald Trump was insisting that he's going to convince Egypt and Jordan to accept Palestinians. They want to just remove Palestinians from their land and send them to Egypt and Jordan. And recently we had, right after that, Jordan and Egypt rejected to that sort of proposal on the part of Donald Trump. And there is a new letter by Saudi Arabia, UAE, and other Arab states rejecting that sort of idea together with Egypt and Jordan. How capable are these countries to go against the decision on the part of Donald Trump?
I was wondering that same thing over the last few days, especially looking at how Panama capitulated so fast and how Canada is capitulating so fast also. I remember, you know, the foreign affairs minister of the US landed in Panama, and within hours, Panama gave him whatever they want to. Uh, is going to break the contract with China for running the Panama Canal, is going to allow American Navy to pass through the canal for free, and gave them a base right on the border with Colombia and on the Gulf of America. And Canada is also capitulating. So I wonder how much the Egyptian or the Jordanian state will, oppose whatever Trump is demanding of them. But at the same time, if actually Trump or if the government of Jordan, let's say the king of Jordan, accepts what Trump wants, I tell you, there will be no more Jordan immediately. Not because only the population will revolt, but also because there's the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan, which is the biggest political movement in the country, and the Muslim Brotherhood is a collaborationist movement with the West. They were founded by the British in the Suez Canal in the 1800s, when the king of Egypt still had some patriotism in him and was trying to push the British out as a way to destabilize Egypt. And eventually, alhamdulillah, thank God that actually Jamal Abdel Nasser came into power and crushed this Muslim Brotherhood for a while. But the point is, in Jordan, the Muslim Brotherhood will probably help topple the government of the royal family, not because they will be wanting to fight the Israelis, but to make it easier for Trump to continue expelling the Palestinians. So although all these demonstrations in Jordan over the last 16 months were mainly organized by the Muslim Brotherhood, looking like they support the Palestinians, they're really going to be the ones that allow this to happen by toppling the government and creating a chaotic situation, right? So I would be worried for the future of Jordan, even if they attempt to not accept what Trump wants. In the other side, in Egypt, I think Egypt has more leeway here because it's not a small country. It's 110 million people population, has a huge army, and it controls the Suez Canal, one of the most important trade routes in the world, and can cause damage on both America and the American plans in the region and on the Zionist colonies. So I think if there's going to be any expulsion of Palestinian from Palestine, it's not going to happen to Egypt. Not because America doesn't want it, but because it's too scary. There's also no, the Muslim Brotherhood could be also activated in Egypt as it would be activated in Jordan. But Egypt, the Egyptian government of Sisi went on a rampage of executions of the Muslim Brotherhood over the last decade. There's not much left of the leadership on the ground, and the population has been crushed that supports the Muslim Brotherhood. In Jordan, that didn't happen. The Jordanians don't have executions as a punishment. There's not many jails in the country, and anyways, it's like a theatric play between the Muslim Brotherhood and the king. And so there is a bigger chance that the Muslim Brotherhood could cause chaos in Jordan that will lead to the expulsion of Palestinians from Palestine, but not true for Egypt.
Do you think that by next week, this time, the Israelis are going to be totally out of Lebanon?
I think so. I think so. I think it's even going to happen before that, because the pressure is mounting. And also, we have the coming public funeral for Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the ex Secretary General of Hezbollah. And there was going to be probably a national holiday when that happens on the 23rd. It will be a Sunday. And they're already building a big shrine for him on the road to the airport of Beirut. So I think the Israelis will not want to be in Lebanon as the emotions of the Lebanese people are rising when the funeral happens. So I think the Israelis will see it as in their interest to withdraw, not to give any pretense for Hezbollah and the resistance to reactivate. That moment of burying Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah will be, there will be international dignitaries from all around the world coming, and probably thousands of pilgrims from Shia communities and resistance groups around the world and freedom lovers around the world. I know a lot of people that are activists from across the world that are not Muslim, that are not Arab, that are already booking their flights and coming now. So it will probably be one of the largest funerals we've seen in the Arabic world since the death of Jamal Abdel Nasser. Maybe it's going to not be as big as the funerals of General Soleimani in Iran, but I believe it's going to be the biggest funeral in the Arabic world since the death of Jamal Abdel Nasser. So that those moments of high emotions are very dangerous for the Israelis to be, instigating people at that moment. If they try to stay till then, I think Hezbollah will attack them before the day of the funeral, because they will not have the funeral with the possibility of Israel attacking. If the Israelis continue to stay, they're only inviting attacks on them.
Thank you so much, Laith, for being with us today. Great
That's really
pleasure, as always.
See you soon.
Take care.